CBC's Tashauna Reid joins us now with a tall tale about a high-rise in the works. Tashauna.
Adrian, this parking lot behind me could be the future site of the tallest building in all of Western Canada. That is, if the city approves it.
It would stand 71 stories tall, part residence, part five-star hotel, and office building. The Edmontonian would soar over the downtown core.
So far this month, Edmonton has seen 42 centimeters of snow. That's more than double the average that we typically see in November. The impact of Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines is being felt here in Canada. We'll hear from one Edmonton woman who is desperately waiting to hear from her family in one of the hardest hit areas.
Like most kids her age, Charlize just wants to play. But on a recent visit to IKEA, she was denied that. Store employees overheard Charlize and a friend speaking French. They started questioning the kids in English.
IKEA says in Quebec the same rule applies in its playlands, except children must be able to communicate in French. But in English Canada, for people who speak other languages, the English-only rule still applies. As you can see, the water has gone down since this morning, but the damage is still being felt. Residents on the lower level of this apartment building were flooded, and they were forced out of their homes.
Not everyone enjoys the so-called Alberta advantage. It's estimated about 100,000 Edmontonians are living in poverty.
The Poverty Committee asked all candidates how they would handle poverty if elected. Responses are posted on its website, and the action plan will be before a new city council next spring. Tashauna Reid, CBC News, Edmonton.
22 actors will be reciting their lines and blocking out their movements in a box. And with such little space, they're not shy about getting up close with the audience.
Scott, it happened just after 5 o'clock this morning. Police dog Quanto and his handler cornered a man in the RCMP parking lot just behind me. The events that happened after that were tragic.
I want you to know that PSD Quanto died doing his job.
Here at West Edmonton Mall, people were willing to wait in line for that bargain. Others were ready to get out. I'm Tashauna Reid near Castor, Alberta, where there are a lot of questions about a fire that destroyed a home on this farm just behind me. I'll tell you all the details of this ongoing investigation coming up on CBC News, Edmonton.
Tashauna, this all centered on pictures of people crossing picket lines.
Adrian, it dates back to 2006 and a strike at the Palace Casino in West Edmonton. Alberta Health says if you think you may have been exposed to the measles, to not visit a clinic or hospital. Instead, call HealthLink Alberta for directions. While the snowfall is expected to taper off by midday tomorrow, the new concern will be freezing temperatures expected later this week. Adrian?
We will be hit by the deep freeze for sure. Thanks for that, Tashauna.
Adrian, the RCMP won't identify them. They'll only tell me that they have not yet been located. But here at the Castor Hospital, just behind me, the flags have been lowered. And hospital officials tell me it's out of respect for the family. Some people have already left their messages and thoughts about the former South African president who died last week. There's another book set up at the Alberta Legislature. And for people who can't physically come down to any of these locations, there is an online version for people to share their messages. Good evening. This is CBC News Edmonton at 11. We have an update tonight on our story about a former soldier coping with post-traumatic stress disorder and the dog that helped her along the way. Kelly Milonic has been forced to give up her best friend, but as John Archer reports, she's hoping the sacrifice will help someone else. Well, the storms hitting Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes may be far away, but they've caused all sorts of delays and frustrations right here in Edmonton. For many, getting on a flight in time for the holidays was nearly impossible today. The CBC's Scott Frolick reports. The flu outbreak in Edmonton has claimed one life. Alberta Health says a patient has died from H1N1, also known as the swine flu. Overall, the number of cases of flu has doubled in just 1 week. There are 128 confirmed cases in Edmonton. While meteorologist Corey Adel joins me now. Corey, it's just under an hour before it's officially Christmas.
That's right.
We know it's going to be a white Christmas, but what else can we expect tomorrow?
Could see some dangerous road conditions tomorrow.
Now, we've heard the arguments about the pipeline from politicians to environmental groups, but what about the people directly impacted by it? What if the pipeline ran underneath your property? Well, they call him Santa Canada, but he doesn't wear a red suit. For decades now, an Edmonton man has delivered gifts to less fortunate children in Mexico. But as Briar Stewart tells us, this year's trip could be his last.
It's the last thing you'd want on a day like today, getting stuck. It feels like nearly -40 with the wind chill, a tough time to work outdoors.
It's cold. It makes everything a little bit more difficult because all your gear's froze up. And of course, slick roads, so you got to be doubly careful of the other cars on the roads.
These are busy times for the Alberta Motor Association. They're dealing with more than 700 service calls across the province.
Whenever we get into colder temperatures, this is when you are going to have a problem with the battery. So hopefully you've had it checked prior to this cold temperatures and had it replaced if it's faulty.
Car experts suggest using a block heater in temperatures -15 and lower to avoid battery problems.
Make sure that you plug in your vehicle going into next week. We're going to have some pretty cold temperatures going into the overnights.
Around the city, others did what they could to cope with the cold.
School playgrounds were empty today. Both school boards decided to keep students inside during recess and their lunch breaks to keep them out of the cold.
So how many would you say you sell on average?
Average 100 plus a week. We have to stock it every night.
And retailers have been busy trying to keep their shelves stocked. At this Canadian Tire, personal heaters are a hot commodity. Block heater cords have also been in popular demand. In temperatures like this, it's key to be prepared.
In the car, always have an emergency kit. You got your heavy candles in there. You have an extra pair of mittens, socks, shoes. So if you get wet, you can get in the car. A candle gives a lot of heat.
Good advice in any Alberta winter. Tashauna Reid, CBC News, Edmonton.